Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy's online enrichment program for today. My name is Marianne. I'm the Education Director at the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy, and we are so excited for our special guest today. Joining us all the way from South Africa, we have Chris Fallows, who is going to be talking about his work in wildlife conservation and wildlife photography. Without further ado, I would like to introduce everyone to the one and only Chris Fallows.
Hey guys, it's firstly a real privilege to be able to talk to you today about my passion. And Marianne, thank you very much for having me. Here in South Africa right now, we're stuck in the middle of lockdown, and I realized just how much I miss those sharks. You know, when you're not out there with them every day, suddenly you realize just what a big part of your life they play, and it's great that I'm at least having a chance to share my experiences with your audience.
Yeah, we are so excited. To get started, we have a lot of, young kids who love sharks and they want to grow up and they want to work with sharks and work in wildlife, someday. So could you start off by explaining a bit about your background and your schooling experience and maybe any certifications you have, as we get started this morning, so that kids have that understanding of what kind of career track they could go on one day?
Absolutely. So the parents out there are probably not going to strictly want to hear what I'm going to tell their kids, but as a young guy, I was one of those kids who didn't spend too much time looking at books. I was always out in the field. I don't know if you can see the photo of me with the big bronze whaler shark there. I don't know if it's come up on your screens, but I spent a huge amount of my life out in the field learning about my subjects. And I guess the most important thing was I really was very fortunate that I was able to follow my passion. So, that gave me an in-depth understanding of the animals that I was going to work with for the rest of my life. And being a passion, it's something I've wanted to do. I wake up in the morning and I want to get out there and see those animals. I do have a degree in marketing and management. How much that helps me, I don't know, but I think the most important thing for me is that my eyes have always been my textbook. On average, I would spend 200 days on the ocean a year, and I've worked with great white sharks for more than 30 years and spent my entire life working with wildlife. So very, very privileged to follow my passion. And for anybody out there, your grades and what you do at school are really important, but I think what the most important thing is in life is to follow what you truly love. And if you follow your passion, there's a good chance you'll be successful and attract people towards you to help you along the way as well.
Great. And I think that's great advice for all of the kids at home, is to really look and find something that they're passionate about so that they're excited when they go to work every day. For some of our viewers who have been with us before, we've had a lot of other scientists and people talk about how they spend very few days actually on the field and a lot of day in a lab on a computer. So I think it was really exciting for many to just hear you said that, you can spend about 200 days out in the wild. So I know you have some incredible photos you want to share. So maybe if you want to start going through some of those and just talking about, what some of those days look like and the work that you have been able to do.
Absolutely. So I'm going to, just not only talk about great white sharks and sharks in general, but all forms of wildlife. As a young guy growing up in Africa, you immediately drawn to creatures of the bush, and that's where I've spent a huge amount of time in the wilds of southern Africa. So when I'm not on the ocean, usually my wife Monique and I are spending a lot of time in very remote places in southern Africa and all around the world. And a big part of what I do is not just research with sharks and not just taking people out to see them, but also I'm a fine art wildlife photographer, and I use my images to convey the essence and beauty of animals to those who are not as privileged as I am to spend time out there. One of the areas that I've spent a huge amount of time is at Seal Island in False Bay. Many of your listeners and viewers will probably know that Seal Island is arguably the world's most famous location for seeing great white sharks flying out the water. And in 1996, I was very lucky, along with a colleague, to discover this unique behavior. And for 25 years, we've documented that. My wife and I have documented this incredible behavior at that little island you see there. It's home to about 65,000 Cape fur seals. And we've documented and recorded more than 10,500 predatory events involving sharks trying to catch these seals. During that time, I've seen some amazing things. You know, I guess most people who follow sharks have seen the images of great white sharks jumping out the water. And most of these come from that little seal colony at Seal Island, which lies around about 25 minutes from Cape Town. In fact, some of these images are pretty famous for all sorts of different things. I'm sure you guys have all seen that photo of the shark grabbing the diver under the Black Hawk helicopter. Well, that photo was taken at Seal Island, and I'm sure you recognize the bridge in the background as well. So, you know, great white sharks, and particularly flying great white sharks, have captivated the world's attention for a very long time. And as such, you know, the work that you guys are doing at the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy is so important, because these animals play a vital role in our ecosystem. They play a vital role for tourism. And, you know, it's just an animal that's been around for millions of years and certainly deserves its time on this planet. So you can see, you know, Seal Island in False Bay is obviously well known for the many documentaries that have been filmed there. I don't think this image is streaming so well. We'll go on to the next one.
Oh no, it is.
How's it? Is it streaming?
Yeah, it was coming through. Now we're able to see, I think we did go the next one, but now it's showing the seals coming up out of the water.
Okay, has it got a little bit of a lag?
Yeah, I think it does have a little bit of a lag, but
okay, well, you're going to see, you know, flying great white sharks that have made Air Jaws and a lot of the Discovery Channel movies pretty famous. And you know, no matter how many times you see these sharks jump out the water, every single time is incredible. Every single time is really, I guess, a reflection of these animals' incredible athletic capabilities and behavior. And a 2,000-pound flying shark, there can't be too many things in nature that are more remarkable and spectacular to see than that. So I've been incredibly lucky over the years, you know, to see these animals interacting and you know, doing these amazing things, and you know, to go do work, and that's what I see first thing in the morning. Yeah, not too many offices that look like that. And I guess the privilege for me is to be able to share that with a lot of people as well that aren't as lucky as I am.
now, Chris, I think a question that a lot of folks have is, you said, you know, you've been documenting this for 25 years and we're able to see these beautiful photos. You know,
Yeah.
right when you started, were you capturing these photos, or have your photography skills been able to grow and develop over the years with these opportunities? Because I think that's a big part for kids at home to understand, you know. Is it likely you go out there and on that first day you get that incredible image with everything lined up, or how did you develop those skills?
Yeah, so for me, you know, the animals have always come first. My passion, first and foremost, are the animals and wildlife, and the photography came afterwards. So I had a dad who was a wildlife photographer, an amateur wildlife photographer. So I knew a little bit about photography, but to be quite honest, really not much at all. I'd just been going to these different areas with him. And when I got my first camera, I still remember it had I think it was a 80 to 300 millimeter lens. I had no idea how the zoom even worked on it. So the first few times I went to sea, I just shot the thing on 80 millimeters. And a few days later, I was incredibly surprised when I turned it and suddenly this lens became a lot bigger. So, you know, in the early days, I knew nothing about photography, but I knew obviously a fair amount about the animals I was working with. And if I can share one tip with people who are starting out in wildlife photography, it's, you know, get to know your subject, because you can always learn about the technical aspects by just reading a manual. You get to learn about your subject by being in the field, and by knowing what your subject's likely to do, you can position yourself in the best spot possible to anticipate what the likely behavior is going to be, and as such, you know, enhance your chances of getting a great image. They always say, you know, an image like this is luck. Well, I say luck is where anticipation meets preparation, and you know, certainly time in the field will give you a lot better understanding of where and when things are likely to happen. So, you know, get out there, spend time getting to know your subject. You'll also know what the animal's comfortable with, how close it'll allow you to get to it, and what it's not comfortable with. And, you know, always respect the wildlife that you work with. I think that's vitally important, is to understand that we visitors in their world, and as such, you know, we need to be very respectful of that. If you can remember those things, then I think you've learned a lot.
Very good. That's great advice. And, you know, reminding everyone that it's exciting to be able to see this wildlife, but you need to remember it's wildlife and to be respectful of it. We have had a few people who have asked, you know, looking at this picture, because everyone who's watching is able to see it, can you give a bit of perspective as to about how big is this shark?
Yeah, so that's a subadult white shark. That animal there is probably around about 12 foot in length, so about 3.8 meters. The average size white shark that we'd see at Seal Island for most of the years we worked there was around about 3.6 meters, so 11 foot or so in length. Still a subadult animal. Seal Island was famous in South Africa for being where we saw the really big great white sharks. And most of the white sharks you saw at Seal Island were large animals because they were there to hunt mammalian prey for 80% of their life. And we've really just, you know, learned a lot more about this in the last few years. The primary food source for white sharks in a lot of areas around where they occur around the world are actually smaller sharks. You know, people always think, well, excuse me, seals are the most important thing. But even if you use your own area where you guys are, you know, if seals are the most important thing, why would they ever leave that area? You know, why would you just have a season where you have white sharks there? They'll be there year round. So what we learned by spending a lot of time with them in the season they were around the seal colonies, and then when they weren't around the seal colonies, is that these animals were closely moving where you had large numbers of smaller sharks. And those animals seem to be key for the white sharks for around about 75% of their life history, until they become, you know, near to adults, when obviously they have a shift to predominantly mammalian prey.
Great. And one of the other questions that came in, and you might talk about this as you go through some of your other photos, but some people are asking, and I think it connects to, you know, understanding your subject, as you said, but how weather can then affect, you know, when you're going out to observe these animals, and, you know, will you go out in all weather, or, you know, does it get affected?
You know, you generally, because for many years we were taking people to sea, so you're always very respectful of the weather. You also get to learn the capabilities of your craft. You get to learn your own capabilities. But I think, you know, in certain conditions, we would see incredible white shark behavior. You know, the sharks really attacking the seals. And that was often in very, very rough conditions. So I was always comfortable with my knowledge of the ocean. I was also very comfortable with the vessel I was using. And so we'd often go to sea in extremely rough conditions, and then hide close to the island where we work to be able to see these white sharks, you know, under those conditions. Because otherwise you get a very biased impression of what these animals are doing. If you're only going out there on the calm, flat days, you know, you're really just seeing what they do on those days. And great white sharks don't have the choice whether they want to just hunt on calm days. They have to hunt whenever there's a chance to catch their prey. So by going out in all weather conditions, pretty much throughout their season, we really started to understand what great whites do, the different weather conditions in terms of different winds, in terms of different tides, different swell, different cloud cover, by day, by night. So, you know, we didn't just kind of stick to the nice calm conditions to actually work with these animals. We try to be out there in as varied a range of conditions as possible.
Great. And I'm sure that makes some days at work easier and some days much harder.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there were many days where you get out there and half the boat's seasick, and yeah, you're not seeing much, and you know, you're just hanging on for dear life, and everybody's wet and everybody's cold, and they all look at you like you're stark raving mad for taking them to sea. But you know, there were far more days where it was pretty incredible, and we really did see some amazing stuff. So you need to be out there all the time, and you also can't do any research project over a short space of time, like a year or 2 years or 3 years. You know, for 25 years on every single trip we've undertaken out there, and that's well into the many thousands. You know, I think we've logged over 4,000 trips to that. And you know, you see seasonal changes, you see annual variation, and if you were just to model fisheries management on 1 year's worth of data, it could be a statistical anomaly. You know, it could be a year that you're just seeing very different behavior. So you need to do it over a long time to get reliable data that you can make, I think, statistically correct decisions that, you know, can positively help contribute to our knowledge of the animal, and also from a fisheries management point of view that allow you to do the right thing for the entire ecosystem, I guess.
Great. In talking about that, I know when we were talking before, you know, there was some, you know, conservation, you know, topics that you wanted to talk about with some of our viewers who are watching from home, looking at wildlife overall, if you wanted to share some of that.
Yeah, I don't know. Are you still getting the photos on the screen? I don't think so. I think they disappeared. Or are you still getting them?
I'm not. So right now we're able to see you, but we're not seeing the photos. The screen share isn't there.
Yeah, I'm gonna just try and try and power up on this one here, and see if we can get that back again. I'll just see. I'll actually just ask Monique if she can come do that for me quickly while we keep chatting there, Marianne. Give me 1 second. I'll be back in 2 ticks.
Okay, no worries at all. So all of our viewers who are, you know, maybe just tuning in, so we are fortunate to have Chris Fallows, who is joining us, and he's actually joining us from South Africa. So, you know, it is about 4 o'clock in the afternoon there. So we've got a bit of a time difference. And, you know, Chris Fallows is a wildlife photographer and scientist, and we are extremely fortunate to have him joining to share his experiences with all of you at home. So we're just trying to reconnect the screen share there so we can share some more of those images.
Just trying to get back there, but you know, Marianne, I think one of the things that for me has been the most rewarding over all the years of working with these sharks is getting to know them on an individual basis. You know, that comes with time. It's kind of like, you know, you have a classroom full of friends, and amongst those friends you have the really shy ones, and then there's the crazy one, and then you know, those are a little bit goofy. And the great whites are exactly the same. They've all got unique personalities. And, you know, every year when those favorite ones came back, it was like seeing an old friend. And when they didn't return, you know, it didn't feel good at all. And, you know, as with all forms of nature, I mean, every one of you has got a cat or a dog, you know that animal's got personality. And it's exactly the same with the big sharks. You know, all the sharks, they've all got their own unique personalities, and getting to know those personalities over the years, that was amazingly rewarding. So I think that's got to be one of the great highlights of working with sharks, you know. And I guess one of the saddest things is, you know, when people just go out and kill these animals, they don't realize they're not just killing a shark, they're killing an individual. They're killing a creature with a personality. They're killing something that has feelings pretty similar to our own, in terms of they feel pain, they get scared, they feel threatened. You know, when we tag the sharks and we would put a tag into them, you can often see the sharks flinch, you know, and you realize that you've got to be incredibly sensitive with these animals. Yes, they might be big, powerful, great white sharks, but they're also very sensitive animals, and you know, they deserve our respect.
Yeah, absolutely. From your experiences, has there been, one white shark that really stood out to you, more than others because of its personality with all your time on the water, or?
Yeah, I'd say there have been. I mean, I think any teacher in a classroom is lying if they say they don't have favorites. And yeah, there have been. I mean, there's one in the late 90s and early 2000s, a shark we called Rasta, after a Rastafarian. And the reason we called the shark Rasta is because the shark was so laid back that we couldn't believe it could actually catch seals, and we thought it was probably eating seaweed. And she was just the most amazing shark. When we first saw her in the mid 1990s, she was a young animal of around about 2.7 meters. And over the 12 or 15 years we had spent time with her, we watched her grow to at least 14, maybe 15 foot in length. And her incredible personality stayed the same all that time. She was unbelievably relaxed, and she would often come and swim along the side of a boat and put her head out and have a look at all on board. And I'll never ever forget one particular encounter where she was doing that time and time again, and people were just gasping. They couldn't believe that this was a great white shark. And she came up to our dive step and rested her head on our dive step for what must have been 2 or 3 seconds. It doesn't sound a lot, but when a great white puts its head out the water without any bait or any attractant and rests its head on your dive step and just looks at all on board, you can't but be touched by that animal. And yeah, Rasta, I think, left an incredibly special mark on everybody's heart that saw her. And then there've been, many others. I mean, there was another one called Kaz, that we call cousin of Rasta, because that shark was also incredibly relaxed, and he was also a shark we watched for close on 15 years. He was an amazing hunter. He had a very docile and curious side to him, but then he also could really turn it on, and an amazingly efficient animal. And then another one of our all-time favorite sharks was a shark we called Shy Guy. And the reason he was called Shy Guy is that we saw him hunt on over 60 different occasions, and only once in 12 or 14 years did he ever come to our boat. So he showed no interest in us, and he was just at Seal Island to catch seals. That was all he came there to do. The boat was of no interest to him, and he just went about doing what was important to him. And I loved that. I loved the fact that he was aloof. I loved the fact that he didn't interact with us at all and just did his own thing. And that, there were such contrasting personalities. And then, we've seen some sharks just for 1 year or 2 years, and you get to know them for a very short period of time, and you wish you saw them more often. And we've had some truly huge great whites. There was a shark, one of our real favorites, called February, and the reason we called her February was the very first time we saw the shark was in February of, I think it was also late 1990s, and she was around about 3.4 meters long, so about 10, 11 foot in length. And she arrived at Seal Island in February, and we used to never see sharks there in February. So she was, unique in that aspect. But she also had these amazing white markings that we call rosés. So rosé is what is called a leopard spot, is called a rosé, and she had these beautiful white markings like a rosé on her dorsal fin. And that's how we'd recognize. And over the years, the last time we saw her, she was around about 5.5 meters in length. So I think that's around about 17 or 18 foot, and a fully mature female, and incredibly confident. And it was just, what a privilege to watch that shark over a large part of its life and get to know it every year. It was just absolutely incredible. So yeah, I can't but be grateful enough for the opportunities I've had to get to know these amazing creatures over the years.
Yeah. And it sounds, I think it's amazing to be able to hear you talk about, so in depth about these personalities, with the observations that you've been able to have and the time you've been able to have out there on the water.
Yeah, it's all about time on the water. It's all about just being there. You do have a lot of quiet days. You have a lot of days where nothing's going on, and you are just so grateful for those days where it does all come together, but you earn those days. You know, it's like anything in life. You put the time in and you get the results. So, you know, if somebody's studying and somebody's, you know, really working on different components in their life, you've just got to apply yourself, and eventually, you know, things come right. Just trying to see if we can get this back up again here for you guys.
Okay. I
Have
just
you got
resent
it
the link
linked
to
up
you,
there?
Chris,
Okay, great.
because I do think she's gonna have to rejoin the Zoom call.
Okay, let's try here and see if we can get going again. But you know, your white sharks, when I was lucky enough to spend time in Chatham in August last year, and I went out with your team, you know, it was the same thing there. You guys have got white sharks that you know extremely well already, and you guys have seen how certain sharks stay close to the shore in certain areas, and they seem to have their own little preferred hunting areas. And you know, I think it's exactly the same everywhere else in the world. You know, if you spend time on the ocean, you get to know what are the familiar behavioristics of each one of those animals that you spend time with.
Yeah, we have seen some interesting personalities out, you know, off the coast here, in the work that's done off Cape Cod. There we go. So now we're able to see that screen again.
There we go. Okay.
To make a slideshow.
Great. Okay, let me get powered up here. So you guys have got that photo?
Yes. Yep. So we're able
All
to see it's you on the paddleboard.
Yeah. So, you know, one of the things I really have tried throughout my life working with great white sharks is to show people that they're very, very different to what the press commonly portrays them as. You know, it's an animal that, for the most part, really wants to have very little to do with us, to be quite honest. I'm just going to try and see if we can get this to play as a bigger slide. Okay, there we go.
There we go.
And you know, it's very easy for me to say to everybody, you know, if you get in the water, that for the most part, sharks aren't going to do anything to you. But what I've actually tried to do is to actually go out there and show people that, you know, I've paddle boarded with great whites, I've surfed with them, I've free dived with them all around the world, I've kayaked with them, I've been pulled behind little boats and little sleds, I've walked on the bottom of the ocean with them, and not once have the sharks ever acted openly aggressively towards me. Yes, they've been curious for sure, and they might have come and bumped me, but they haven't rushed in to try and grab me and eat me as many people would expect. In this case here, I'm paddleboarding with a really big great white shark in Gansbaai, which is about an hour and a half from Cape Town. And to get that shark to actually show interest in me, I had to paddle ahead of her and let her choose to join me. If I paddled towards her, she would swim away from me every time. And you know, you see this time and time again in all the different ways we work with these animals. You know, in a case like this, you know, working with great white sharks has been unbelievably exhilarating. And I would be lying if I said I didn't find it thrilling to work with these animals. You know, I love predators. I don't like seeing things die, as crazy as that sounds, but I love predators. I love what makes each predator special, you know, the refinements on these animals. And to be at close quarters with a great white shark, yeah, it's you know, it's been an unbelievable thrill for me over the years. And you know, I've been so lucky with all the different documentaries to have done a huge range of different things, you know, to be able to go and do observation work of seeing what great white sharks look like hunting from water level, you know, to lie on a little sled like this. Well, this is in New Zealand with a shark called marble tail, a massive great white coming up and investigating me lying on that little sled was, you know, an amazing experience. And I think in many of the documentaries, you know, I think the producers and the directors were hoping I'd be a little bit more scared. But to be honest, you know, it's just an amazing experience. I can't get enough of great white sharks. You know, I can't get enough of them coming close to me. I can't get enough of watching them swim majestically underwater. You know, it's like anybody has a fascination maybe with jet fighters. To watch a jet fighter come screaming in at low level it's exhilarating, and to see a great white shark doing it, you know, it's exactly the same thing. And you know, the beauty of these animals and their athletic ability of them is is truly amazing, you know. And I think so few people don't realize just how few of them there are actually left on the planet. You know, in South Africa, sadly, our great white shark population has completely crashed. And we now know that there's a very big reason for that, is that the smaller sharks have been completely fished out. And one thing I'd really love your audience to go have a look at is, you know, there's a campaign out there called sharkfreechips.com. And I'll say that again, sharkfreechips.com. And that's really a campaign aimed at trying to get particularly Australians to stop eating South African sharks, because we export all our sharks to Australia and they're not being sustainably fished in South Africa at all. And what that means is that the primary food source for the great white shark is no longer there. So our population of great white sharks is now shifting and disappearing. And you're going to see these trends all around the world if people in different locations, you guys included, don't start paying attention to the entire ecosystem surrounding great whites. You know, you can't just focus on the single species. You have to look at the whole ecosystem that the animal fits into. It's, you know, no human just lives in the bathroom. You live in the kitchen, you live in the lounge, you live in the dining room. And for great white sharks, they have all these different components to their life as well, and you can't manage them without, you know, looking at all those components. I think one of the truly amazing things for me has been getting to see the different strengths of both predator and prey. You know, the seals have got an amazing agility, they've got incredible endurance, but the white sharks have got power and speed. And in terms of the overall success of the great whites at Seal Island, it was 49%. So let's call it 50%. It's the perfect balance. You know, half the time the seals get away and succeed, and half the time the great white fills its belly. The only difference is the great white can make many mistakes. The seals can only make one. But getting to know, watch, and understand these dramatic battles has been simply remarkable. You know, we've seen the most incredible escapes where the seals have literally jumped out of the sharks' mouths. You know, in this particular case, we were filming for Planet Earth, and the seal actually pushed itself out of the shark's mouth using the shark's teeth. And then, you know, sharks have had their meal escaped by the narrowest of margins. I mean, here you have life balancing on a knife's edge, and many of your viewers won't believe, but in both the last two slides, the seals actually managed to get away. And wow. I think for me, you know, it's just, I have an unbelievable respect for both predator and prey. I understand that the sharks need to eat, and if they don't catch the seals, they'll die. And by the same token, you know, when we work with these interactions, I always try and stay a respectful distance away, because the smallest mistake on the seal's part can cost it its life. And ultimately, that animal's life to it is as important as mine is to me. So I have a huge respect for both predator and prey. And obviously, I understand that, you know, the sharks need to eat at times. And of all the animals that I've been lucky enough to work with in Africa and all around the world, I'd have to say death by a great white shark is probably one of the most humane. They catch their prey, they usually tear it in half with a single bite or two, and that's it, it's done. It's not like watching a lion take down a buffalo, where the buffalo might be alive for half an hour. In the case of the seals at Seal Island, it's literally seconds if they do catch them. And you know, the seals themselves have remarkable adaptations. You know, you can see this animal here, just before it dives into the waters, taking that breath. You can see it looking, you know, opening its mouth there, and they've got incredible efficiencies themselves. And to watch the seals, how they've defined their own anti-predatory strategies, that's also been incredible. And you know, when you work with the sharks, you're not just working with the sharks, you're working with a whole suite of animals. And I know off Chatham, you guys have amazing humpback whales that come through there. And I was lucky enough to go out with John King, who I know, you know, is one of the main drivers behind your project and a fundamental cornerstone of the project. Then John fortunately took us out to have a look at the whales, and to see these animals feeding off your coastline like they do here is incredible. We are so lucky to have these opportunities off our respective coastlines. And I think once you start beginning to understand that the great white is just a component in a larger picture, and you start seeing how all these different animals interact, it's an amazing puzzle to be part of. You never will fully understand it, but by being out there every single day, you start understanding it. And I think the more time you spend with the animals, the more you realize what little we do know, and probably in many lifetimes when we won't properly understand them all. This creature over here, one of the great albatrosses, a wandering albatross. This animal lives for over 60 years. It can circumnavigate the globe in 23 days. They mate for life. They'll travel 5,000 kilometers, so just over 3,000 miles to go find food for their young. And for the first 5 years of their life, they won't touch land. I mean, just think of those things. It's an amazing, amazing creature. And sadly, 19 of the 23 species of albatross are now threatened with extinction. And I've been lucky. I've spent huge amounts of time with them. And every time I see these creatures, I realize just what a absolutely incredible planet we live in. And, I think so many people are realizing that now with the coronavirus. You hear the sounds of the birds that little bit better. You appreciate sounds and calls of nature. And we've seen on TV, I mean, all of us have, the goats in Italy feeding on the people's bushes in suburbs. And you've all seen the lions lying on the roads in Africa. It's just amazing to see nature having a little bit of respite from us. And then all the other species of sharks, great whites have been the primary species that I've worked with, but I've also been lucky to work with all these different sharks around the world and to understand a little bit about them. I mean, you guys call these, I think, grey sand tigers. In South Africa, they're ragged tooths. Australia, they're grey nurses. And for all their formidable mouthfuls of teeth, they're actually, pretty harmless animals and pretty docile. And then seeing the great white in different realms around the world. This is in New Zealand, where you have these unbelievably beautiful seascapes. We have all these golden forests of seaweeds. It's incredible. And this lord of the sea comes cruising in, and it's like being in a underwater avatar. It's the most truly incredible undersea world. And so many of these other remarkable creatures, sailfish rushing in and slashing at a shoal of fish with their bills. It's like watching a beautiful flamenco dancer come rushing up to you, and she twirls her skirt around. And this is what these fish do to confuse their prey. And, just to see these animals. And off the US coastline, you guys have some of the most amazing shark diving and shark viewing opportunities in the world. And sadly, there are so few places left like this. And this was at Tiger Beach in the Bahamas. For the pretty docile tiger sharks, they're almost goofy and clumsy. Very different to great whites that are these supercharged, highly athletic animals. The tigers come in and they push you around a little bit. And yeah, it was just an amazing experience to spend time with them in the water. And you realize how different every shark is from the next. With 500 odd species, each one occupies its own niche in the food chain, and everyone's special and everyone plays its own specific role. And then, many shark species come together in large numbers. I mean, these were lemon sharks once again in the Bahamas. And to see these guys, these guys were like a bunch of naughty teenagers rushing around and clowning around. And, just a special experience to see so many sharks together. It was in a world where they're disappearing so quickly, to just see such numbers of sharks was kind of like stepping back in time and imagining how it was all those years ago. And then other creatures on this planet, I've been lucky to go to all 7 continents many times, and I think one of the places I love the most is a little island down, way down in the Southern Ocean called South Georgia. That's home to over, depending on who you speak to, 40 to 100 million seabirds, 600,000 elephant seals. I mean, that elephant seal you see lying in front of me there, southern elephant seals, the largest seal species on Earth. That animal can weigh 10,000 pounds.
Wow.
When you think of that number, it's truly incredible, you know, and you see these animals doing these unbelievable battles. And then you have these blue glaciers with 3-foot high, incredibly colored penguins everywhere. You know, it's just an incredible world we live in. And then the march of the penguins, in this case, you know, these animals had to walk kilometers from their normal beach simply because where they were feeding, a leopard seal was trying to kill them. So they literally walked over these mountains to another beach many kilometers or many miles away. And when they finally got there, there was another leopard seal waiting for them. And it makes you realize the hardships nature has to contend with every single day. You know, just absolutely beautiful, beautiful birds. And yeah, a completely different world. And, you know, these places are unbelievably cold. I mean, many of you in the US, you guys have real cold. You know, I know certainly in the northern parts of the US, you know, in winter, the temperatures drop to well below 0. And, you know, when we work in the Arctic and sometimes in Antarctica, you know, you get temperatures that are close to minus 50 degrees Celsius. I think that's well into the zeros Fahrenheit. And animals live in these worlds, you know, to see a polar bear walking across a glacier face, you know, you have such respect, because I couldn't last 2 minutes out there. And then, you know, coming back to Africa where it all began, where I'm sitting talking to you from right now, if I was a crow and I could fly straight, which crows can do, I guess, I would fly 7 kilometers to where a lot of recent research is showing that the origins of Homo sapiens come from. So 7 kilometers, 4 miles from our house is where it all began. And for me, Africa, you know, is truly special. You know, we've got all these incredible animals, but people don't realize just how fast they're disappearing. I mean, that's a great tusker. And for me, one of my loves is photographing tuskers. There are only 25 to 30 of these great tuskers. A tusker is an animal with 100 pounds of ivory on either side of its trunk. Okay. Only 25 to 30 of these animals left on the planet, you know, and lions, less than 20,000. You know, just 2 decades ago, there were well over 100,000 of them. And, you know, to spend time with nature, no matter where it is, it gives you a sense of calm. And I think a lot of people are experiencing that now. You know, it's a time where I think we're reconnecting with ourselves, and we're reconnecting with a lot of things that are important. And it makes you realize, when you step away from the hustle and bustle of the world, just how important those things actually are. You know, and for me, having spent so much time with wildlife, you know, you realize things move on a different time zone. And when you slow down life a little bit, it becomes a lot clearer to you, and you realize, you know, I don't want to say what it's all about, but what other important things in life are, rather than just always chasing the next buck or the next deadline, which is important, but I don't think it should rule and occupy our lives. You know, there's so many incredible things to see out there. And, you know, in today's age, I think we're so lucky that we've still got a lot left. There's not as much as there was 30 years ago, not even close, but we have the means to see it now. And if we don't do everything we can today, the people tomorrow, the next generation, won't see any of it. They'll have every opportunity to get there with, you know, automated drones and goodness knows what else. But there might not be these incredible things left. You know, we have 2,000-year-old baobab trees and unbelievably big African elephants standing under them, or enchanted forests where, you know, bull elephants walk through these incredible places. you know, Africa just has got so many of these incredible opportunities out there, but they are disappearing fast, and we need to do whatever we can to conserve them. You know, you asked me a little bit earlier about rough weather, and I don't want to tell you guys to go out there in rough weather. Next thing I hear that their boats capsizing all over the east coast of the US because of me. But you know, when there's a big storm coming, it's really beautiful to go sit on the shoreline and watch waves crash into harbor wall, or just watch massive waves breaking on the beach and just feel the power of nature. You know, it touches you in an incredible way. And as a photographer, I watch weather like crazy. I mean, you know, I'm obsessed with it. I watch synoptic charts. I can't wait for the next big storm. I used to be obsessed with surfing big waves. And, you know, it just touches you in a way. It awakens your senses to, you know, experience these things. Walking down a beach with 750,000 king penguins, each one a 3 foot high, and they sound like little Formula One cars revving their engines, like wow, wow, wow. And you times that by 750,000 times. It's a sensory overload. You know, you watch these animals going underwater, and these clumsy penguins on land suddenly become these little jet propelled rockets, or a megapod of dolphins, you know, cruising by. And then, you know, sharks, icons of our ocean. I think that if there's one symbol that elicits emotion from an animal point of view more than any other, it's the cleaving dorsal fin of a great white shark. Love them or hate them, you know, it stirs in us an amazing emotion to just be able to see that fin cleaving through the surface. And these animals have just refined every niche. You know, you look at a mako, you know, close relative of the great white. It's like a Formula One car. It looks like a Mercedes Formula One car, and absolutely incredible creatures. You know, they've just mastered design and efficiency in the ocean. And then this is a site, you know, you guys have in your neck of the woods. That's beautiful False Bay with the Cape Peninsula Mountains in the background. And for any of you who've been to South Africa, Table Mountain, World Heritage Site would just be to the right of that. But you know, that's how these animals can be seen in a very docile and beautiful way. But anyhow, I've chatted a lot. I've got a few more slides if you guys want to see them, but I'd love to hear some of your questions, or just hear whatever you guys would like to chat about.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that was coming in, and, you know, I want to acknowledge, I think it's incredible how, you know, especially with yesterday being Earth Day, April being Earth Month, you know, I think a lot of people get excited about sharks, but it's important to note for everyone that, you know, when it comes to conservation, you have to look at the ecosystem as a whole, you know, and the way you talk about the sharks, to hear you talk as, you know, profoundly as you do about the seals as well, and the connection. And, you know, I think that's important for everyone to hear, that, you know, to protect one thing, you have to look at all the things it interacts with and really focus on the ecosystem. So we had a few questions that came in regarding, you know, how the ecosystem and the white sharks in South Africa might be different than the ones, you know, what are some of the differences from the ones that we see off the coast here of, you know, Cape Cod, and how our ecosystem is different?
Yeah, okay. So where we're working with the great whites in False Bay, we're working around an island. So the seals are on an island that's around about 400 yards long by around about 100 yards wide, and there's 65,000 seals on that island. Your seals are obviously all along the coastline. Typically, for the white sharks to get to them, they have to get into very shallow water. So a very different environment compared to ours. We do have a similar setup at a place called Plettenberg Bay, which is about 300 miles east of Cape Town, where the sharks patrol cliffs, and along those cliffs are the seals, and they catch them when they come off the cliffs. It is relatively similar to, if I'm thinking, you know, your sharks have to go to the shoreline to grab the seals there. But for us in False Bay, where we work with the white sharks, as well as at Dyer Island in Gansbaai and Mossel Bay, Seal Island, we're working around seal colonies, so very different behavior. The sharks have got deep water, so they can launch these, come from deep and launch these Polaris-like missile strikes on the seals. And then they're going and specifically targeting the young of the year seals. So seals that only weigh around about 50 or so pounds. So, you know, a lot of your seals are quite a lot larger than that. So, you know, those are the different strategies we're really seeing there. And then, excuse me, from a seasonal point of view, obviously it's a slightly different times of the year to when you guys are seeing it. Your peak season, I think, if I remember correctly, is really August, September, October, around there.
Yep.
Ours is April, May, historically was April, May, June, July, and the first part of August. And then the sharks would leave the island and move inshore to feed on these smaller sharks and rays. And when I was chatting to Dr. Skomel, to Greg, he was telling me, you know, that you guys have got large numbers of spiny dogfish offshore. And there's probably a link with those animals. You know, the white sharks go out to feed on them when they're not feeding on the seals. We've seen exactly the same thing at Stewart Island in New Zealand, when I've done a lot of diving, you know, on the ocean floor down there. Huge numbers of spiny dogfish in that area, and the white sharks obviously feeding on them. And the same on the south coast of Australia. You know, a lot of areas where the white sharks were when they weren't at the Neptune Islands or Dangerous Reef, they were inshore in areas where you got a lot of gummy sharks, or we call them smooth-hound sharks, and school sharks, Sufferin sharks or toad. And, you know, they highly reliant on those smaller shark species. So there are a lot of similarities between the areas in terms of what the white sharks are feeding on, but the strategies they use to catch them are remarkably different.
And can you talk a bit about, a question came in, you know, about orcas down in South Africa, and, you know, the role that they are having now with, you know, white shark populations and just the ecosystem as a whole?
Yeah, so good question. A lot of people ask about the orcas and the white sharks in South Africa. So up until 2009, I'd been working with great whites in False Bay then for around about 15 years already. We had never seen an orca in False Bay. And from 2009 until the present, we've seen 7 different pods, and we've had 43 interactions with those orcas within 2 miles of Seal Island. On not one occasion did we see any change in white shark behavior around Seal Island related to the orcas' presence. The orcas were hunting primarily dolphins in False Bay, and as such, you know, there wasn't much of a clash or overlap in what they were feeding on. In around about 2017, 2018, there were 2 orcas in particular, known as port and starboard. The one's dorsal fin folded to the left and the other one's folded to the right. And it was believed, and I think without any conclusive evidence, it's highly, highly likely that these 2 orcas had killed at least 5 different great white sharks around Dyer Island in the Gansbaai area. And what happened is, shortly thereafter, the white sharks disappeared for a substantial period of around about 5 to 6 weeks, but they did come back again. And we've seen this on a couple of occasions where port and starboard have been around. You have a complete absence of the white sharks for the short to medium term periods. That, however, doesn't explain the complete absence of great white sharks for the most part from Seal Island and False Bay, and from around Gansbaai, and from now Mossel Bay. And, you know, we strongly of the opinion that the primary food source, the smaller sharks, has been wiped out. So these white sharks have completely left the area. So until that balance is restored, you know, who knows what the future holds for the great whites in South Africa. Yes, the orcas do have an effect, but from all the data we've collected and data connected to orcas feeding on 7-gill sharks as well, it's a period of around about 4 weeks to 8 weeks that these sharks are absent for, and then they start returning. You know, in any form of the terrestrial environment, a predator, when one predator comes into when one apex predator comes into another area where there's another apex area, the displaced animal doesn't completely leave forever, because there are only so many optimal feeding areas out there that you have to kind of find a way to coexist. So what will typically happen with, let's say, lions and wild dogs is when the lions move into the area, the wild dogs kind of start hunting where the lions aren't, and as soon as the lions move out of the area, the wild dogs come straight back in again. And the orcas are not staying in these areas for much more than a day at the time. So it doesn't make any sense for white sharks that have been feeding in these primary feeding areas for generations to completely leave them, because there are only so many of them, and never come back. So, you know, that's why you see these gaps in the time that the white sharks are there, but they always come back. Whereas now we're seeing a complete absence of white sharks, and, you know, related to that, stock collapses of the smooth hound sharks and the soupfin sharks, and these are being exported primarily to Australia for fish and chips called flake and chips.
Great. And do you want to give the name of that website that you had mentioned earlier if people want to learn more about that?
Yeah, so it's sharkfreechips.com.
Okay, thank you. Another question that came in was looking at some of the technology that you've used. So some of the footage, it looked like maybe it was taken by drones, as well as, you know, how do you keep your cameras, you know, to capture these amazing photographs, you know, there in the water? How are you keeping them safe from, you know, that saltwater environment?
Okay, so yeah, so when I'm shooting on a boat, I'm very careful where I position myself on a boat. So I usually try and have some structure in front of me that if there's spray coming over the boat, I'm protected from that. I always try and angle my lens as best I can slightly away from the wind, so I don't get salt going straight onto my lens as well. If there's somebody that's prepared to stand in front of me, I always try and find a guinea pig or victim that I'll stand behind, but people quickly cotton onto that, and I'll find them standing downwind of me as equally. But you know, you really learn how to position yourself on a vessel. And I'm very lucky, you know, Monique has been a very skillful captain of the boat, so she knows how to position the boat in the best position to get the images without being disrespectful to my subjects. And then also, you know, in a way that we're not taking huge amounts of spray over the boat. But during the making of the documentaries over the years, trust me, we've had a lot go wrong. You guys only usually see the good stuff. We've lost many cameras, many contraptions that have cost a lot of money have been eaten by sharks literally within seconds of putting them in the water. We've had a lot of equipment failure. On our last film shoot to New Zealand, one of the guys accidentally dropped a lead weight and destroyed, you know, a camera there. Oh, he dropped it on a camera. We've had cameras fall overboard. Yeah, all sorts of things have gone wrong over the years with cameras. So yeah, most of the time it works out, but every now and again you lose a little bit of equipment. But just from a positioning point of view on a boat, always try to position yourself behind structure. Always try and point slightly away from the breeze. And it's also a very good idea if you're going out on someone else's boat to ask them where the driest spots are on that boat. You know, get familiar, get the locals to make you familiar with the layout of their vessel and where the best place to take photos from is.
Very good. And we did have some questions come in as to, you know, what is your favorite type of shark? You talked about some of the white sharks who have left, you know, a strong impression on you with their personalities, but, you know, what is your favorite shark species, as well as of all the, you know, wildlife you've been able to photograph? Is there a favorite animal, you know, that you just get so excited to be able to go out and photograph?
I don't have one, but there are a couple. I love great whites because they have so much personality. And if I have to be honest, there is no shark in the ocean like a great white. It's just got an all of its own. You know, when a great white rocks up at a boat, you know that the boss is in town. But I would have to say the most beautiful shark to look at would have to be a mako, just because their design is so perfect. They're like jet fighters and everything about them is sexy. They just, you know, truly gorgeous animals to look at. I love great hammerheads. Just that 3 or 4 foot high dorsal fin and huge hammer is, I don't want to say it's an oddity, because it's not. It's just so awesome, you know, to see a really big hammerhead. I love oceanic white tips because they're no nonsense sharks. When you're diving with them, they don't bother circling you. They just come in and bump you. Uh, I love the boldness of those sharks. And then I love some of the small sharks. You know, in South Africa, we have a whole lot of little endemic sharks, a puff adder shy shark. And as the name suggests, I like the famous snake in Africa called a puff adder. It's got these beautiful markings on it. So yeah, there are a lot of sharks I really, really love. And then with terrestrial wildlife, I would have to say a wild dog, an African hunting dog, or painted wolf, as they're now more politically correctly known. And the reason why I love wild dogs so much is that they have got such incredible teamwork. They always look after the young. You know, they're always putting their team members first. They're incredibly efficient hunters. They're very, very quick killers. I mean, a lot of people think it's ruthless the way they tear their prey apart, but to be quite honest, I'd rather be torn apart in 20 seconds than have something choking me for half an hour. They're just animals that exhibit incredible social caring and behavior that I think a lot of humans could aspire to. So wild dogs, and then honey badgers. Are honey badgers like your wolverines, or I think the wolverine's the closest animal up north. But they're just crazy, you know. They're huge claws, and they punch way above their weight division. They're scared of nothing, and you know, I just love them for their tenacity. So those are animals I really love. As a young boy, I love zebras more than anything else. I still love zebras, but yeah, I think wild dogs have taken over zebras for now.
Excellent. Well, Chris, we can't thank you enough. I mean, you know, we're all social distancing and we're all at home right now, and you just took us on this photographic journey around the world. And I think you really helped to inspire a lot of people to get involved in conservation. So, you know, for our final question, you know, what is your advice? You know, what is it that young people, you know, especially the kids or people of any age, you know, what is your advice for them to be successful in conservation efforts, and what are some of the things that they can do?
Okay, so to be successful in conservation, there are a lot of things actually. You've got to be passionate. You've got to believe in what you're doing is the right thing. You know, I think that's really important, because you're going to get a lot of criticism from a lot of corners. You're going to be called a greenie. You're going to be told that you're affecting everybody else's livelihoods by what you're doing, by trying to save things. You've got to stand by your own convictions in life. If you believe what you're doing is right, you've got to stand by that. And that's a very important thing for conservation, because it's not all pretty out there. You know, you get a lot of heat along the way, and stand tall, believe in what you're doing, and you know, that in that way you inspire others to believe in that as well. You know, and very importantly, you are the mouthpiece for these animals that cannot say what they probably would like to. And you know, think of it this way: we've around the world been in lockdown in worst case scenarios since January or February, so that's 2 or 3 months. Wildlife around the world has been in a lockdown as a result of our activities for as long as humans have been on this planet. You know, we've impacted on them in every conceivable way. So I think, you know, going forward, I think we need to learn to be more tolerant of the fact that these animals have as much right to be on this planet as we do. I think we need to work together and understand that, you know, there are alternatives out there. We can make sustainable choices. You might have to give up something you really like eating, but at the end of the day, you know, by making those choices, you create a far more vibrant world. And I think for anybody getting involved with wildlife, you need to understand that it's not an even road. You know, it's not plain sailing. You'll have some of the highest highs you could ever imagine. I would never change what I've done in my life, and if my life ended tomorrow, I'd be as happy as Larry. I've lived every moment, and every moment has been made that much more special by wildlife. But also understand that you're going to suffer a lot of defeats along the way. You know, you're going to lose a lot of battles, but ultimately, if we all stand together, we can maybe win the war. And I think, you know, that's an important take-home lesson, that today's younger generation really has to stand up to my generation and the generation before me, and stand up for your future. Because if you don't, there is not going to be any wildlife out there, and it's a pretty sterile and boring world without it. Make a noise, stand up for your future, because the world is that much richer by having all these other species on it.
I think that is an incredible note to end on, and incredibly powerful words. So Chris, we can't thank you enough, and thank you to Monique for helping with the technology and getting everything set up. We are so grateful for you connecting with our audience this morning and really helping to inspire them to get involved in conservation of sharks and all wildlife, and really looking at the ecosystem as a whole. Did you have anything final you wanted to add before we sign off?
No, other than, I don't know if everybody out there is aware of the tremendous amount of good that the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy is doing. And I've worked with great whites in pretty much every location around the world with various research organizations, many scientists. And I have to say, and I'm not saying this just to be patronizing, but your teamwork, your foresight in terms of educating people ahead of the event that may transpire, and your attempt to create a balance between understanding the white shark and also having bather protection, and also looking after people's interest, for me has been really inspiring. And to see people that are truly motivated by just your passion for the animals rather than their own causes or their own financial greed, I think has been a real eye-opener to the way it should have been done in many places around the world, and hopefully will be done in many places around the world to come. So yeah, well done to you guys, and hopefully more people use you guys as an example.
Well, thank you. That means so much coming from you, and we are incredibly grateful. And again, we want to thank you so much for your time today. And thank you to everyone who has been watching and has been sharing this interview with Chris Fallows. So we're going to go ahead and we are going to log off. Thank you, Chris, and thank you everyone for tuning in.
Cheers, Marianne. Take care. Bye-bye, guys.